You know that feeling when you're hiking through a forest and something moves in the trees just outside your line of sight? That low, animal instinct that says stop. Something is watching you. 50,000 years ago, that feeling wouldn't have been paranoia. It would have been survival intelligence. Because the first humans to set foot in Australia weren't just walking into a new continent. They were walking into the most stacked predator lineup any landmass has ever assembled. And the terrifying part is that nobody warned them. There were no stories, no elders who'd been there before, just a shoreline, a tree line, and everything that had been evolving in isolation for 45 million years, completely unbothered, just on the other side of it. 1 mile of that landscape, any mile, would have been statistically more dangerous than anywhere else on Earth at any point in human history. And today, we're walking through it. 45 million years of unsupervised evolution. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Australia didn't just accidentally end up dangerous. It engineered its own danger, slowly, deliberately, over tens of millions of years of complete biological isolation. When Australia drifted away from Gondwana, it took its own passengers. No big cats, no bears, no wolves, no placental predators of any serious size. What it had was marsupials, pouched mammals, and with no outside competition arriving to shake things up, those marsupials were left completely free to fill every ecological role the continent offered. Prey animals got bigger. Predators got more specialized. Herbivores grew armor, size, or both. And the reptiles just kept going uninterrupted along evolutionary paths that the rest of the world had long since abandoned. The collection of megafauna roaming Australia some 50,000 years ago included 1,000-pound kangaroos, 2-ton wombats, 25-foot lizards, 400-pound flightless birds, and 300-pound marsupial lions. And more than 85% of everything weighing over 100 pounds went extinct in the window immediately following human arrival, a number that tells you two things simultaneously. 1. How loaded this continent was. 2. How decisive the arrival of one particular primate turned out to be. But before we get to the ending, let's talk about what was actually out there. The kangaroo that walked like a man and could destroy one. If you picture a kangaroo, you're picturing the wrong thing entirely. Procoptodon goliath was the largest kangaroo that has ever existed on this planet. Standing at approximately 2 meters tall and weighing between 200 and 240 kilograms, it was built nothing like the graceful hoppers we know today. The face was flat, almost primate-like, with forward-facing eyes that gave it depth perception more reminiscent of a predator than a grazer. Each foot had been reduced to a single massive hoofed toe, like a horse's hoof scaled onto a marsupial. And the forelimbs were long, clawed, and powerful enough to haul tree branches down to feeding level. Unlike modern kangaroos, Procoptodon and its thinurine relatives were likely completely unable to hop, instead moving bipedally in a striding gait somewhat similar to hominids. Picture something 2 meters tall, walking upright on a single hoofed toe, staring at you with forward-facing eyes. That's Procoptodon. Herbivore or not, that's a threat assessment problem. In New South Wales, Aboriginal people still recount stories of a large, long-armed, aggressive kangaroo that would attack people. Cultural memory encoded in oral tradition, passed down across tens of thousands of years. That's not mythology. That's a warning system. The animal that took 4 attempts to identify. Some animals are so strange that science itself can't agree on what they are. Palorchestes azale was first described in 1873 by Richard Owen, the same anatomist who coined the word dinosaur, and he thought it was a giant kangaroo. He was wrong. Subsequent researchers thought it looked like a tapir. Also wrong. By the 1980s, the only thing paleontologists could unanimously agree on was that Palorchestes had what one researcher formally described as a high coefficient of weirdity. That phrase made it into the scientific literature. Let that sink in. Palorchestes azale was similar in size to a horse, being around 2.5 meters in length, with body mass estimates based on humerus and femur bones indicating it could well have exceeded 1,000 kilograms. It had 4 powerful legs. The front legs ended in large, curved, scimitar-like claws. Not the gentle browsing tools of a standard herbivore, but something that more closely resembled the digging claws of a ground sloth. The long lower jaw of all Palorchestes species. indicates their tongues were long and protrusible, like a giraffe's, and the nasal structure of the skull was so deeply retracted that scientists spent over a century debating whether it had a prehensile trunk. Palorchestes would have been able to stand on its hind limbs, using its specialized forelimbs to haul itself upright against a tree trunk, then reaching into the foliage with its long tongue while hooking into the bark with its claws for support. So, a 1-ton marsupial, standing upright against a tree, hooked in with scimitar claws, reaching overhead with a giraffe tongue. And ancient rock art found across Australia appears to include depictions of exactly this animal, painted by people who watched it do exactly that and decided it was worth recording on stone. The marsupial that made lions look slow. Here's a test. 2 predators, same size. One is an African lion. One is a marsupial the size of a large female lion. Which one kills its prey faster? If you said the lion, you'd be wrong by about 15 minutes. Thylacoleo carnifex, the marsupial lion, is the subject of a biomechanical study that most people haven't heard of but probably should have. Analysis of its skull, jaw musculature, and dental mechanics indicated that pound for pound, Thylacoleo had the strongest bite force of any mammal ever studied from the fossil record. A medium-sized individual could generate biting force equivalent to a lion more than twice its weight. Prey animals the size of large kangaroos were estimated to die in under a minute. A full-grown African lion working the same size prey can take 15 minutes or longer. The killing mechanism was the thing. Thylacoleo's front teeth, large, blade-like incisors, drove deep into the prey's neck region. The enormous shearing premolars, which function like a pair of heavy scissors, then severed the windpipe and major blood vessels simultaneously. 2 separate fatal events in a single bite. Combined with the semi-opposable thumb claw on each front foot, retractable, hooked, and attached to forelimbs powerful enough to hold struggling prey in place. This animal was mechanically optimized for rapid killing in a way that has no close parallel in living predators. It also climbed. Cave scratch marks and skeletal evidence suggest Thylacoleo moved through trees the way leopards do today, caching kills out of reach, ambushing from above, navigating vertical terrain that other predators couldn't follow. It was present across the continent. It shared its landscape with Procoptodon, Palorchestes, and the first humans who arrived. None of them would have had any preparation for what it was. The cold case science still can't close. Here's where things get genuinely complicated and genuinely recent. For decades, the dominant scientific narrative was straightforward. Humans arrived, humans hunted, megafauna collapsed. The overkill hypothesis. Clean, intuitive, satisfying. Research published in Nature Communications found that the demise of megafauna in Southwest Australia took place from 45,000 to 43,100 years ago and was not linked to major changes in climate, vegetation, or biomass burning, but was consistent with extinction driven by human activity. But in October 2025, researchers from UNSW, the Western Australian Museum, and Griffith University published a paper in Royal Society Open Science that complicated that picture significantly. The study re-examined fossil bones that had seemed to support the human hunting hypothesis and arrived at a new conclusion. What had been interpreted as butchery marks on a fossilized giant kangaroo bone was more likely the result of taphonomic desiccation, a drying process that occurs long after death, not human tools. Australia has no confirmed kill sites, no incontrovertible hard evidence that early humans were hunting and butchering megafauna, in contrast to sites found in North America where evidence of mass hunting is clear and unambiguous. What does that leave us with? A continent that lost over 85% of its megafauna within a few thousand years of human arrival. No monuments to fallen giants. Most of the megafauna probably just slowly, quietly, across generations, ran out of room, ran out of food, ran out of time. What's left of them now is bone fragments in limestone caves, spore traces in ocean sediment cores, burned eggshell fragments at 200 scattered sites, and stories, impossibly old stories, about giant kangaroos that walked like men, and things that waited at the waterhole, and creatures that came out of the forest that nobody had a name for yet. The most dangerous mile on Earth didn't disappear because something defeated it. It disappeared because something arrived that was harder to survive than anything the continent had ever produced. Thanks for watching. Until next time.